All right, so we just witnessed the most important waiver wire of the year because of how many injuries we just witnessed. An absurd amount. We'll start with the priority list as always with Tyler Algier, number one. It's 9.6 fantasy points last week, getting so many snaps at the goal line as well. He's getting a more increased number of snaps because the Falcons are running the most 2 RB sets in the NFL, giving him opportunities. At the bare minimum, he is an elite premium handcuff running back to Bijan Robinson, but the bare minimum for your fantasy team is going to be hitting that subscribe button on this page. If you guys are new, I will continue to give you league winning advice until the fantasy playoffs, until the championship, which we will win. Hit that like button if you appreciate it, but we'll get into the next guy, which is Michael Wilson, who belongs on the priority list after doing what he just did, the unthinkable against the 49ers defense. I mean, he was the number one overall wide receiver on the week, 33.5 fantasy points, catching 15 of his 18 targets for 185 yards. Like, that is insane. He gets another positive matchup this week against the Jaguars, who are top 10 in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks, so they'll be able to continue the pass volume and efficiency. Jacoby Brissett is top 5 in passing volume as the starting quarterback. Tez Johnson is another member of this priority list. Now, he didn't have a ton of fantasy points this week, but you guys know if you've been on this page long enough, fantasy points is not the teller of fantasy value. He ran 34 routes next to Emeka Egbuka at 35. That is number 1 and 2 in total routes last week for that team. There will be better days to come, just like Kayshon Boutte, who didn't play last week because of the injury. He's still rostered in less than 50% of leagues. It doesn't make sense to me. He's likely going to come back this week against the Bengals, which we all know is a top 10 matchup to fantasy wide receivers. Is going to be a good one. If he doesn't, he's still a guy we need to stash. Drake May and this entire team has been playing at an insane level. They're also top 10 in all passing efficiency and metrics. And speaking of passing, Tajay Spears also belongs in this priority list. I mean, the amount of usage he gets in the pass game is so important because we know this Titans team is never going to be winning games. They're always going to be playing from behind. So he gets an increase in usage and routes every single week because of that. We also have Theo Johnson in the top half of all tight ends in target share, especially with Jackson Dart in his healthy start so far this year. He's going to come back. That is going to continue. And they also have a very positive rest of season schedule for fantasy points allowed to tight ends. Also, the number one priority out of this list is going to be Kenneth Gainwell. Regardless of his 29.5 fantasy points, Jaylen Warren only played 1 snap after his ankle injury in the third quarter last week. Any game that he is out, Kenneth Gainwell is going to be a top 15 running back. He comes in very easy rest of season schedule until he gets to the fantasy playoffs in the championship game, but still, there are very many elite waiver wire ads for week 11. So the top one for this video is going to be Emmanuel Wilson, probably the most urgent. After Josh Jacobs was ruled out in the second quarter with a knee injury, he did not end up coming back versus the Giants. There's a very real chance that he's out for the rest of the fantasy football season, or at least until the fantasy championship game, somewhere around there with his PCL injury. It's almost a guarantee that he'll miss at least this week, so it makes him a top ad already. He'll probably be back in week 13, but again, more than likely, in my opinion, it's a 2 to 4 week injury. It's the same PCL injury that took Ricky Pearsall out for 6 weeks. Knee injuries are nothing to mess with, so as more MRIs come out throughout the week, we will have more information on that. Again, be subscribed if you want to keep up to date on that kind of news, but we also saw after he went out, Emmanuel Wilson took 99% of the touches, 11 carries, 40 yards, and a touchdown. And most importantly, if you watch any of my videos, you know exactly what's coming here: routes. He ran a ton of routes, 19 routes on his 39 snaps, compared to the only other running back that took touches, Chris Brooks, only saw 5 plays. He had 1 rushing attempt on those after Jacobs' injury. Simply put, depending on how long Josh Jacobs is going to miss, Emmanuel Wilson could legitimately be a league winner at running back. Even if you don't need one, he is worth an ad. I'd put pretty much all of my fab on him, especially if you have Josh Jacobs, as well as Bashal Tuden, who was destroying this Chargers defense before he came down with his ankle injury. Now, it's not considered to be serious, definitely nowhere near Josh Jacobs, even though they're 2 completely different injuries, but still, he might miss a week, maybe 2 max. But before that happened, before his injury, he was by far the more efficient running back for the Jaguars. In 3 quarters, he had 74 yards and a touchdown on 15 carries. That's 4.9 yards per carry. Now, ETN has been the more efficient running back from weeks 1 through 10, so it's not like all of a sudden he's going to come in and be a workhorse RB1, but he was out-snapping, he was out-touching Travis Etienne in those first 3 quarters when he was healthy. They split goal line carries. The only job that Travis Etienne has completely dominated as far as a per snap basis, because Bashal Tuden hasn't been playing a lot, is the pass catching role. Like, he is always consistently running the most amount of routes, but this is the kind of rookie spark last week that we just saw that will earn you more snaps. It's almost a guarantee. We'll likely need to give it a few weeks for him to, number 1, work back from injury if it is anything serious, but number 2, just work into this roster as increasing his snaps as the week go on. But you look at these matchups, he gets the Tennessee Titans, who are top 3 in fantasy points allowed to running backs in week 13. that could be a massive game as well, making him impossible to get off the waiver wire. Even if, again, he is out this week, he is still worth a stash. The main issue here is that the Jaguars' rest of season schedule are against teams where they're going to have to stick to a more pass-heavy script, which definitely does hurt Bashaw Tutin. Travis Etienne will be the more valuable running back in those types of game scripts. I mean, we saw the Chargers got absolutely boat raced by the Jaguars, which is why he got so much usage. So that's likely not going to continue every week, but still a guy that we should go add. Just like Sean Tucker, who may be a valuable player, but experts do have it all wrong, and they're selling you a dream on what he actually is. Still worth something, but let me explain that for you. You cannot ignore his 34 fantasy points against the Bills. It was a positive matchup. Like, the Bills defense is pretty positive in allowing fantasy points to running backs, but 19 carries for over 100 yards and 3 touchdowns, 5.5 yards per carry. Very impressive. Let's lay the groundwork with that. But we obviously know Bucky Irving is going to come back soon. If not week 12, probably week 13. It will take him maybe a game, maybe two, to work back up to a full snap share because it was a very serious longer-term injury. But he is really nothing more than a handcuff, a premium handcuff insurance plan to Bucky Irving. He had one big game. He has one big game every single year. He did the same thing last year. It did absolutely nothing for the rest of the season. And he still played behind Rachaad White despite the massive amount of efficiency he was seeing in total snaps and total routes run. I do agree that Sean Tucker is simply better. Like, he is a better running back than Rachaad White, but they do have very hard matchups coming. A very tough one this week in week 12 against the Rams. It's inevitably going to be a backfield split with Rachaad White, even if it's not as close as we just saw. It makes him an elite handcuff, but don't go throw all of your waiver priority, all your fab on Sean Tucker. I don't see it being a league winner out of all running backs, especially for having Bucky come back. But Christian Watson, on the other hand, might be that guy for you if you need a wide receiver as well. It might be your last shot. After we put up 20.6 fantasy points in a very positive game versus the Giants, you guys know we don't get distracted by fantasy points around here. You look for waiver wire targets based on the underlying numbers. Sometimes the fantasy points can be deceiving, but since coming back from his injury in week 8, he's averaged 58.5 yards per game on 3 receptions. Now, he's never really been a volume guy. He doesn't need 7 receptions to be fantasy viable. The routes that he runs, the way they use him in this offense, you don't really need that. So that's positive for him. And it also gives him massive touchdown upside to tear off those big plays. And he's still increasing his snaps every single week since coming back from his injury. It's still climbing. The highest snap share of the year last week led him to his highest target share of the week as well. Romeo Doubs has been dropping a ton of passes like he always does. Matthew Golden hasn't really found himself a role in this offense despite being a high draft pick and despite how many injuries to all these wide receivers we've seen. They're not really true competition. Now, Watson has locked in a wide receiver 2 role for the remainder of the season, even when Jaden Reed does come back. We saw last year they were running all of the exclusive 2 wide receiver sets. That's likely going to continue again, and we can expect them to lean on more of the pass game if Josh Jacobs is going to be out for a consistent amount of time. We've seen in previous years and weeks when Josh Jacobs is not in, they do lean more on the wide receiver screens, the sweeps, stuff like that. So that's going to be a value for Christian Watson as well. But speaking of wide receivers, Luther Burden has a huge breakthrough nobody is talking about, and we have to lean on it. Like, it makes no sense. Burden has officially won the starting slot wide receiver role for the Bears over Olamide Zaccheaus. Shout out to Luther Burden. Clap it up for you. I'm not going to do that in the mic because it might pick up way too loud, but this is exactly what we expected from him in the past weeks. I mean, Ben Johnson has, number one, been telling us that he's going to earn more targets. He's had a season high in route participation last week because of that. He was telling the truth, and that allowed him to finish with the most targets he's seen all year at 5. Now, he played in 100% of the 3 wide receiver sets. He played in a lot of 2 and 1 wide receiver sets, more than he usually did. So we can expect a higher and higher and higher snap share as the weeks go on, pretty much guaranteed. I mean, you add the fact that DJ Moore has been very inconsistent on top of his health issues popping up in the questionable injury report every single week. Roma Dunze has also been playing pretty inconsistently, and they're very, very pass-first matchups coming in the future for them. I don't think people are really understanding what they're seeing with Luther Burden, especially the fact that he's won the slot wide receiver role. This is a guy that we need to be stashing and adding, but if you need a quarterback, that top guy for you is going to be Jacoby Brissett. He is your top option. I mean, I can't believe he's doing what he's doing. From week 6 through 11, he has been a top 10 quarterback in the NFL for fantasy points per game, over 20 a game, still only rostered in 22% of leagues. And it's not like he's been going through cakewalk matchups. Like, he's had the Packers defense that he put 19.7 fantasy points on, then the Seahawks defense where he dropped 19.4. And he does have a hit or miss rushing upside. Like, some weeks it's there, some weeks it's not. But again, without great running backs, he's been a top 7 quarterback in passing attempts at 41.8 per game, 314 yards averaged as well. I could keep going with some of these numbers that he's been averaging, but if we're adding Jacoby Brissett, it is to be plugging, playing, and starting him. And he gets an amazing matchup against the Jaguars this week, who are top 10 in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks so far this year. He also gets a Buccaneers matchup the week right after that one, which is a pass funnel of a defense. Trey Benton's probably going to come back. We also have Marvin Harrison coming back soon, making the offense that much better and allowing him to be more efficient as a quarterback. He's the number one ad at the position this week. But if you're looking for defenses, you're looking for kickers, we'll start with the Raiders. If we do get Shedeur Sanders starting this week, it could be a smash. I mean, we saw Dylan Gabriel go out early last week, allowed Sanders to complete only 4 passes, very bad pass completion percentage. One of those completions were also an interception technically, so he really was not efficient. You can also get the Browns against the Raiders in this one as well. This is a defense that dominates in their positive matchups against really bad offenses so far this year, so that matches here. Geno Smith does throw a ton of interceptions as well. We can almost guarantee that and a ton of sacks. The 49ers also are a good option here. They've been pretty hit or miss so far this season, but they get a really good one this week against the Panthers, who have looked good last week, but not something that we can expect to happen on a week-to-week basis. I mean, they're pretty inconsistent here. They allow over 8 fantasy points per game to opposing defenses so far this year. If anybody went through and dropped Kaimi Fairbairn because of his injury, this is a guy you need to go get as soon as possible. He's averaging over 11 fantasy football points per game. Him and Cam Little are both my top 2 kickers to add of the week, rostered in under 40% of leagues. The Cardinals are a very good matchup for kickers. They are top 5 in fantasy points allowed to the position. But that's going to finish out this video, guys. I do have a video of the top waiver traps you need to avoid coming out tomorrow. And trust me, there are a lot of traps you don't want to miss. So make sure to have your post notifications on. And I will see you guys in the next one coming soon. All glory to the man above.